Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kristina Berzina and I represent the Central Election Commission of Latvia and also Executive Board of ACEEEO. We are now starting our first roundtable discussion, and I ask everyone who are in the hall also to join us. And as well, I say hello, good day, good afternoon to, or maybe good evening to all those participants of our conference who are listening online. Actually, this is a great honor to be here and to chair the first roundtable discussion about the topic which has been of the main interest through all these 30 years, youth participation in elections. And this topic, as I believe, is significant for each country in ACEEEO region, as well as for each country all around the globe. Actually, there's also a study, if I'm not mistaken, it is a study made in Denmark that shows if a person takes part in election for the first time, it's a huge possibility that he or she will also go to vote next time and will continue to vote in future life. So if it is true, then the important question we as election administrations, international organizations in the election field should seek for an answer. What have we done to achieve this goal, how to succeed, how to motivate, and what we can do to encourage young people go to the polls for the first time. And I hope that exactly this question will be the leading motive for our excellent and experienced speakers today. And I think together we try to answer to this question. So, but before I give floor to our first speaker, I have to tell shortly about the protocol of our session, as we have 5 participants and about an hour for the discussion. I would kindly ask each speaker to fit in 10 minutes time. And I will try to remind you with the sign that there are 2 minutes left. So please stick on the time. And for those who are listening our discussion online, please be aware that you can comment or ask questions in the chat section. And it is also preferable that you turn off your cameras while you are not speaking. Okay, and now we can move further, and I give the floor to our first panelist. She's also our keynote speaker today, Ms. Augusta Fatherson, Associate Democratic Governance Officer and youth focal point. She is from ACEEEO here, and in her position, Ms. Featherson develops and oversees ODHER's youth political participation and implements activities designed to assist OCE participating states in supporting the participation of youth and promoting democracy, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. Please, Ms. Featherson, if you hear us, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, and very, very dear colleagues, good morning. On behalf of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, it's a pleasure and an honor to participate in this roundtable discussion. And I'd really like to express my appreciation to the ACEEEO for their vision in bringing us together to talk broadly about youth political participation as part of this annual conference. The values of broad participation in decision-making and pluralistic democratic institutions really lie at the core of the OSCE commitments. And it's these values and commitments are even more relevant today when we witness some backslide in democracy and democratic institutions, of course, exacerbated by the global pandemic. But we really start this discussion today with the understanding that democratic institutions are made stronger when the voices of many, and especially young people, women, and other traditionally underrepresented groups are included. because we know that truly representative democracies are resilient and deliver better outcomes for citizens. And so an honest conversation about how to reinvigorate democratic institutions really requires the energy, input, and representation of all young people, in particular at the decision-making table, as they, in fact, will most acutely face the consequences of our actions today. Young people have always been and remain today a key group for the OSCE's vision of comprehensive security. OSCE participating states have acknowledged through a preponderance of ministerial level declarations and other documents that youth are an important part of our societies and have highlighted the role that young people play in supporting participating states in implementing commitments in all three dimensions. To put it shortly, youth is both our future and our present. So it's well known at this point that recent research shows that globally youth satisfaction with democracy is declining. This tracks with other sort of more general trends, but not only in absolute terms, but also relative to how older generations felt at the same stages in life. And we're learning about the toll that the COVID-19 pandemic has taken on young people in terms of education, operating without usual support networks within the communities. And some young people are now entering a job market that has even fewer entry points. So in response to today's crisis, institutions like yours have a unique opportunity to build more inclusive and responsive systems and democracies, to give young people the voice they deserve, and to make use of their energy, talents, and out-of-the-box solutions. Really to give young people a reason to believe in democracy again. At ACEEEO, we believe that if we want to strengthen our democracies, we must include young people. So young men and women, young persons with disabilities, young people from underrepresented groups, including Roma and Sinti, all of that. We believe that a couple of things really need to be prioritized to make that happen. First, bring young people's voices to the big table. Governments, parliaments, international organizations, and indeed all public institutions really must become better at including young people meaningfully in their agendas. Young people are one of the largest constituencies in any society. We need to bring down these institutional barriers to young people's participation. Imagine how much stronger our public bodies could be if they really engaged this key constituency to inform policies with an eye towards future equity rather than short-term political gain. Some ACEEEO members are already working in this direction by lowering the age requirements for voting and standing for election, exploring youth quotas for elected bodies, and implementing other measures meant to bring down these institutional barriers to participation. We need more such actions. Second, we need to invest in youth energy and vision. Many refer to the younger generation as future leaders, but young people are already leading work on issues that are really important for our communities and societies. Countless young men and women have responded to the challenges of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, working as health workers, scientists, researchers, innovators, running online and offline awareness campaigns, volunteering to help in communities, and other actions. Young people have also taken to the streets at levels not seen in recent memory to demand change on critically important issues. And these are not the actions of future leaders and citizens, they're the actions of engaged citizens making meaningful contributions to their communities today. As such, these actions and initiatives should be invested in and brought to scale for the benefit of everyone in our societies. This will require courage and financial commitment from public bodies to fund youth-driven initiatives at meaningful levels. I know I just have a couple more minutes left. I'd like to take just a few more moments to reflect on the ACEEEO Youth Symposium from earlier in 2021, which many of you attended. At that meeting, 5 minutes, okay, perfect. At that meeting, several colleagues made very, very interesting and relevant contributions. On behalf of ODIHR, I had the honor of sharing our recent work on the Agenda for Youth and Democracy, which is organized around 5 postulates that includes concrete suggestions to a wide range of stakeholders, including public bodies at various levels. Rather than rehash each postulate here, I'd like to simply list them and challenge you to consider what it would look like in your institution if you were to adopt some of the practices addressing each one. So first, postulate 1 is the need for systemic change. And this serves as an acknowledgement that young people are often marginalized by current institutional systems and thus seek to channel their voices through other means. Democratic institutions are sometimes reluctant to fully understand and respond to the needs of younger constituents. And thus, newly emerged groups and platforms are filling a gap that traditional actors are not able to fill presently. What would systemic change look like in your context? Postulate 2, ensure the independence of youth organizations. So often the functioning and effectiveness of youth organizations ultimately depends on access to public funds and a youth favorable environment. Our analysis suggests that bureaucratic operating methods of many institutions, as well as a perceived low return on investment, propagate this cycle of either low or no financial support for youth-led activities. Lack of adequate resources diminishes the role that youth organizations have in resolving current social challenges and hinders their ability to be present at the decision-making table. How does your institution engage with youth-led organizations? How does your institution support those organizations to do meaningful work? Postulate 3, reform institutions. And by another name, this can be thought of as youth mainstreaming. Here, institutions can engage young people in helping design policies and strategies. Does your institution invite young people and youth-led organizations to advise on, help design your policies and programs? Postulate 4, uphold activism and creativity. Recent research suggests that youth engagement is increasingly channeled through non-conventional means. Young people more likely to use digital tools, some of which we heard about earlier on this panel. Does your institution capitalize on these resources, reaching young people where they are in a way that's understandable to them? And finally, postulate 5, invest in civic education and media literacy. It's well known in this crowd that civic education is the foundation for an active and engaged citizenry. What more needs to be said there, really? To close, I'd be remiss if I didn't do this. To close, I'd like to highlight 2 forthcoming tools in support of youth political participation from ODIHR. First, a forthcoming handbook on observing youth electoral participation, which will build on ODIHR's election observation experience in this area and give guidance on existing OSCE commitments and other international obligations and standards related to youth electoral participation. And we'll explore avenues to support youth participation in all areas of the electoral cycle. And second, a forthcoming guideline on youth political participation, which will explore the topic through the lens of national parliaments, political parties, and broader engagement in public life. The intention behind this publication is that we'll offer OSCE participating states a holistic approach for conducting institutional assessments through a youth lens and can provide comprehensive topical introduction to youth political participation across the region, ultimately serving as a complement to ODIHR's other body of work related to inclusive participatory democracies. On behalf of ODIHR colleagues, our hope is that these tools will contribute to the repertoire of resources available for ACEEO members and support your work in a very practical way in enhancing youth engagement. I'll stop here and I welcome further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Feddersen, thank you for your passion to work with young voters in order to motivate them participate in and be politically active. Second speaker of our session, Mr. Ertan Sinani. Mr. Sinani is from Albania. He's the director of the Commissioner's Cabinet of the Central Election Commission of Albania. So, Mr. Sinani also is physically here. Yes. So, and Mr. Sinani is a public relation expert with more than 25 years of experience in the field. So I think also Mr. Sinani specializes in strategic planning and communications and has been responsible for voters' education campaigns during his previous position at CSE of Albania. So he has knowledge and experience both traditional and social media, as well as digital communication and techniques. So, Mr. Sinani, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to meet familiar faces and share same experiences in these interesting times that we're going through. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has not only disrupted human lives across the world, but has posed a myriad of questions and issues, new ones, to government and public systems globally. Now, Albania was to organize general elections in one of the most demanding and unexpected time in the history that people remember uh, in this civilization's memory, at least. As many other colleagues in the room and online, those might acknowledge that the pandemic presented one of the darkest scenarios for election organization at first, but also it brought it brought about new opportunities and possibilities. Now, to make these elections even more interesting, the Albanian political parties changed even the electoral code 5 months prior to the elections day. So basically, all the conditions were set for one of the most unknown elections, especially in the aspect of the organization. Now, the Albanian Central Elections Commission developed a detailed program for information, education, and raising awareness. A very ambitious program, in fact, due to the specific times that we were going through. Not to mention that we had our general elections in April 25th of 2021, but during which time our country, as many other countries around Europe and elsewhere, were having a partial lockdown, but partial just because there were elections to be organized, because otherwise we would have been in a total lockdown. The education program included all voters categories, from young people to first-time voters to vulnerable groups, women, all translated into even minority languages, according to the minorities that we have in Albania. Not only minority languages, but also we had the whole campaign prepared even for in the sign language for people with disability. Now, the program was aimed at each target group, informing them not only on how to vote, but even on amendments to the electoral code, amendments that had only 4 to 5 months that were approved by the Albanian parliament. And these were nothing insignificant. These that included electronic identification, electronic voting, and raising awareness of the public administration for non-involvement in electoral campaigns during office working hours. So the amendments to the electoral code were very substantial and were one of the biggest changes in the electoral code for the last 10 years. Anyway, in cooperation with the Council of Europe and operating in Albania and within the framework of implementing the education program, the aim was to increase the participation of young people. Definitely that remains the key issue. First-time voters, women, and vulnerable groups. The Central Elections Commission of Albania, together with different NGOs, Civic Resistance specifically one of them, and organized a number of meetings with young people with the purpose of educating and raising awareness. We were helped because in April, schools were partially opened. When we say partially opened, they were operated with half of the amount of time they would operate in normal times. And this was one of the key issues. Otherwise, everything would have taken part online. But as you might have found yourselves in your countries, it's very difficult to convince young people to vote if you do not have that eye-to-eye possibility. If it were a rule, yes, you can go back and you can have it online. But first, you have to break the ice with the human relationship. The youth participation in the electoral process is an ongoing challenge for the Central Elections Commission. What we are proud of is that election after election, the number of young people young people and first-time voters increases, and not necessarily that means that they vote as first voters and they're not young anymore, they don't vote. But the idea is to generate new reflexes for to apply their democratic right, and make sure that they know how to use their power. Now, finding out ways and instruments for dissemination of electoral information to young people has been a priority even in these times of utmost importance. Our international and local partners supported the Central Election Commission with projects focused on youth, and these have really played a key role in our way forward to educating, informing, and raising awareness of young people. For example, on the occasion of the Global Election Day on February 4th, 2021, the Central Election Commission, we announced a competition with the involvement of young people for the best video, slogan, and graphics for the parliamentary elections, which were to be organized in 2 months' time. And there was an increased interest of the young people in the competition, and the best works were selected. And an award ceremony was held on the Global Election Day, and the slogan that originated from that competition for the first time was the slogan that was operational in the election. So young people want to feel important. Young people want to feel that they belong to the society. And that is why we did not have our media experts or marketing or PR experts choose the slogan. We gave up that possibility. We let the young people choose their slogan because they could identify with the slogan, they could identify with the story behind the slogan. And after all, it worked. The young people were invited, the winners of the award, to different layers of them, first position, second, and so on. They were invited to the premises, and the awards were handed over by the OSCE ambassador and our CEC commissioner. And on the occasion of that day, of the Global Election Day, we had a conversation with the youngsters about elections, electoral process, and there were a lot of questions and interest. And it was very important to see their commitment to the elections, or to their votes, because that's something that you don't necessarily see in these times of various other issues. And one of the other things that we implemented for the first time was that, as we had new technology, electronic identification of voters, and the pilot project for the electronic voting that we made sure to cooperate with Smartmatic. Mohammed is here, and we thank him for his commitment in the process. And the young people were invited to the CEC official site as operators of these systems. So they not only were the ambassadors of the vote, but they were ambassadors of the possibility of how to operate, of the know-how of how to operate the electronic identification equipment and the electronic voting equipment. As a result, we had many of those young people as operators on election day. Apart from that, and due to the pandemic situation and inability to organize frequent face-to-face meetings with young people, special attention has been paid to the dissemination of information on digital platforms that they mainly use. And those digital platforms are always evolving. So it's not that, because as you probably very well know, with the social media, you do not rest on your laurels. There is an ongoing change, and there is the challenge to stick to where young people are. Now, the participation of young people, even in the most dubious elections, because of the COVID, it still had an increasing trend. So we came up with a growth with different percent points compared to the other elections in pre-COVID times. In other words, we had, in cooperation with the Council of Europe, a spot was produced to raise awareness of women. So not only young people, but women. And the message for women that we do in the country is the one that they should come up and vote with a specific eye on family voting issues, that their vote counts as an individual vote, and they are not a sum of their vote of their spouses. And that is somehow significant in very rural areas. Anyway, due to the COVID-19 situation also, all the produced material, spots and posters that were put in the voting centers had to be in compliance with the safety protocols, but that was one of the biggest challenges, as it's not easy to change a traditional system that has been in place for many, many years, and to adapt it to the needs of the new times. I'm running out, good, and that's okay. I always do that, so don't worry about it. It was a pleasure to be here, and we are available for other talks here all the day. So basically, I would thank you very much for your attention, and wish you all the best with the rest of the activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinani, for your excellent presentation and thoughts. I think they were very useful for all of us. And now we can move on. I will ask our next speaker, who will join us online. He would be Mr. Slaven Hojski. And Mr. Hojski is a member of the State Central Election Commission of the Republic of Croatia. He has been member of the State Electoral Commission since 2015, and since 2017, he is the spokesperson of the Commission. And before his career in CEC, he has been a high-rank official in the government of the Republic of Croatia, and served as the Secretary General of the Parliament. And Mr. Hojski also has specialized in such topics as voter education and electoral participation. Mr. Hojski, if you hear us, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. We also have a small technical problem, but now it's okay. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Slaven Hojski. I'm a member of the State Electoral Commission of Republic of Croatia, and I want to thank ACEEO to give me this opportunity to discuss about young participation and the impact of this current COVID-19 pandemic on it. At the start, I would like to say that youth participation is always an interesting topic to discuss, and how young people can participate in civic life and how they can encourage to do so more are challenges for any society. In this short participation, I will try to briefly explain how our State Electoral Commission approaches young voters, especially in this challenging time of pandemic. Croatian State Electoral Commission is a permanent independent state body, besides its primary role to conduct elections, but Commission conducts other activities prescribed by law. The Commission activity of informing and educating voters is considered essential for raising public awareness and fairness and transparency of the elections. It is important to mention that voting is not mandatory in the Republic of Croatia, and there is no restrictions for voters who don't cast a ballot. Therefore, it is even more important to inspire the voters to exercise their civil right to vote. The question is, but how? We do it mostly for informing voters on their voting rights, the current elections and elections in general, and regular Commission's activities through our website or public media. When it comes to approaching young voters, Commission had outlined their education as crucial. Back in 2018, we started the project called I moj glas je bitan, meaning my vote counts too. The project was aimed at high school graduates who were about to turn 18 and become first-time voters. According to Croatian law, no pre-election registration is needed. All voters turning 18 are automatically enlisted in the voter register, and all they have to do is vote. The purpose of the project was to introduce these first-time voters to basic electoral terms, electoral process and voting process, so they can learn how to participate in the elections actively, as voters, as candidates, as members of the election committees, and as observers. How was the project conducted? The State Electoral Commission members visited during 2019 more than 20 high schools of different educational directions throughout Croatia and lectured more than 1,000 high school graduates. Within their school curriculum, these students learn in general about political system, about constitution, civil rights and duties, legislative, executive and judicial powers of the state. Our lectures provided them detailed insight into the elections, especially those conducted throughout the year 2019, presidential elections in Croatia and European Parliament elections. By educating them on how to vote and how to participate in the election process, we try to emphasize their participation in the elections and why it is essential to exercise the voting right. To make the lectures more interesting for the students, we introduce them to some authentic electoral materials, ballot box, ballot papers, and voter lists. We also stage a polling station in the classroom, and students acted as voters, members of the election committees, and observers. It was a funny way to showing them how voting on the elections day looks like. We intended to conduct this project in as many schools as possible, but then, you know, in March 2020, everything stopped due to a well-known reason, the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, this pandemic is still pending throughout the world and makes us face different challenges in our everyday life. It affected young people's lives tremendously. Classroom and hanging with friends are replaced by screens, various applications, and digital platforms. It affected us and as electoral body too. The elections must be conducted under strict epidemiological measures, polling station and voters adequately equipped with masks and other safeguard items. Hereby, it is important to state that voters in Croatia may only vote in person on polling station. There is no voting by internet or post. That makes election preparation and conduction during pandemic even more challenging. Besides pandemic, my country was recently faced with numerous earthquakes, some of which were devastating. In some cities, all the existing polling stations were ruined. Therefore, the preparation and conduction of local election in May this year were particularly challenging for us. Even 25 polling stations were placed in temporarily installed tents. Still, the State Electoral Commission find young voters education necessary, and therefore we proceeded with our project by adjusting it to the epidemiological situation in Croatia. At the beginning of 2021, we educating high school graduates of the local elections held in May this year, online of course. The Commission filmed a webinar and published it on its website. The webinar content follows the formal lecture contents. It provides students information on elections held in Croatia, basic electoral terms, electoral participation and procedures, as well as the importance of executing voting right. We informed all high schools in Croatia of the published webinar so professors could present it to the students. They could also arrange as online class with the Commission's representative by Zoom, so we have held several online education. Students could check their knowledge in a quiz and fill a related survey published on our website at the end of the webinar or online education. We found these survey results beneficial while giving us feedback from students whether they have any interests in the elections at all. As we were no longer able to communicate with students in person and stage a polling station in their classroom, in the webinar and during online education, we used animation to explain the voting process on the polling station instead. As I mentioned earlier, there is no voting by internet or post in Croatia. Therefore, the students were introduced to obey epidemiological measures on the E-Day. On the polling station, wear masks, maintain distance, use disinfection, and take their own pen to polling station for voting. What did the young voters education teach us? Students show interest of elections. They found it most interesting hearing the actual situation that we experienced in elections, such as those when one vote mattered and changed the course of the whole elections. For example, when on local elections in one municipality in Croatia, both candidates for the local mayor got the same number of votes in the second round of elections, 721, 721. The third round had to be held. Survey results showed us that most students intend to vote in local elections, 75% of them, and we are glad that 89% of students found our education useful. But we are excited even more that after attending our education, most students think that their vote counts. At the end of this presentation, I would once more like to emphasize that even in this challenging time, we need to proceed with education young voters. They need to be aware that almost all governmental issues affect them, such as education, healthcare, or foreign policy. They also need to be aware that they exercise their right to participate in the crucial democratic process by participating in elections. They vote for the leader who should adequately represent them, consider their ideas, and support their interests. By educating young voters, we should increase their awareness and encourage them to participate in any kind of civic engagement. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyski. You were perfect in time. Still 2 minutes left in advance. So it was great to hear about your experience and also that young voters in Croatia are interested in election. That gives us a hope as countries. So we can move on, and our next speaker will be here, physically here, and it is Mr. Evgeny Barkov, Business Development Manager at Polis. Polis is a company that helping their clients to improve the election process by using digital tools as online voting system and electronic voting machines. Mr. Barkov also works in the local election commission of Moscow and has been elected as a member of local council in Moscow. And for over 4 years now, Mr. Barkov works with digital voting methods. He holds 5 patents on digital and remote voting. So, and Polis also is the silver sponsor of this conference. So, as I understood, you will have a presentation. Floor is yours, please.
1, 2, yeah. Dear participants, dear organizers, I would like to invite you to put on your headphones because I will continue my presentation in Russian language. Добрый день, меня зовут Евгений Барков, я работаю в лаборатории Касперского, и проект наш называется «Полис». Моя задача на этой конференции рассказать о том, как я вижу будущее голосования в мире, потому что я вижу, что это будущее будет полностью онлайн. На мой взгляд, в ближайшие 20-30 лет все мы перейдем в голосование от бумаги к цифровым технологиям. Это мое видение, вы можете с ним не соглашаться, но я хочу рассказать в первую очередь про то, чем мы занимаемся в нашей компании, во вторую очередь про опыт России в использовании новых избирательных технологий, в первую очередь онлайн-голосования. 2 недели назад в России закончились парламентские выборы. Это выборы во всей стране, около 100 миллионов избирателей. И впервые, наверное, это второй случай в мире, когда было применено дистанционное электронное голосование, и всего в онлайн-голосовании приняло участие 2 миллиона человек. Это почти 25% населения города Москва. Это, безусловно, большие цифры, и глядя на результаты и явку, и другие параметры голосования, Центральная избирательная комиссия Российской Федерации уже объявила о том, что дистанционное электронное голосование, использование будет расширено, и в 2024 году на президентских выборах будет подключено больше и больше регионов Российской Федерации для использования дистанционного электронного голосования. Вчера я позволил себе пообщаться с некоторыми участниками конференции и обсудить именно вопрос онлайн-голосования. И на мое удивление, я был крайне удивлен тем, что в принципе большинство участников относятся либо нейтрально, либо слегка позитивно к идее дигитализации выборов и использования онлайн-голосования на парламентских или общенациональных выборах. Но при этом есть одна большая проблема, одно большое препятствие для того, чтобы провести даже какие-то минимальные муниципальные выборы онлайн. Это одобрение парламента или получение, в принципе, внесение изменений в закон о выборах. Для этого нужно одобрение парламента, а для этого нужно пройти достаточно много разнообразных процедур. При этом показать какой-то опыт для парламента и убедить парламент в том, что онлайн-голосование – это будущее, невозможно, потому что нет закона. Это такая небольшая дилемма избирательная. Поэтому в Российской Федерации впервые дистанционное голосование было использовано в 2019 году, но оно появилось не просто так. То есть появился, безусловно, был закон, но это появилось не из воздуха. Перед тем, как было использовано дистанционное голосование, было проведено достаточно большое количество работы. Вот как раз об этом и еще о теме конференции, о молодежном участии я хочу рассказать. Значит, немного про нашу систему, про систему от лаборатории Касперского. Сама лаборатория Касперского занимается кибербезопасностью уже больше 20 лет. При этом система Полис была создана в 2017 году, основана на блокчейне. То есть все голоса записываются в блокчейн. Я думаю, что большинство уже членов избирательной комиссии или люди, которые знакомы с выборами, знают, что такое блокчейн, и знают, что это одна из перспективнейших технологий для проведения онлайн-голосования. Система, которую мы сделали в 2017 году, она была создана на базе платформы блокчейн, и в том числе часть технологий или опыта, которые есть у нас, московское правительство, Департамент информационных технологий использовало для проведения дистанционного электронного голосования. Центральная избирательная комиссия Российской Федерации достаточно плотно работает с молодежью в нашей стране через некоммерческие организации и через какие-то партнерства. Каким образом осуществляется работа с молодежью? Центральная избирательная комиссия осуществляет работу молодежную. В первую очередь комиссия поддерживает молодежные избирательные комиссии, которые проводят выборы в молодежные парламенты, коих в России больше 80 по регионам страны. А с другой стороны, Центральная избирательная комиссия работает с агентством по делам молодежи и помогает студентам в университетах проводить прямые выборы глав студенческих образований. Таким образом рождаются новые молодежные лидеры, и таким образом популяризируется вообще идея хождения на выборах и участия в выборах. Мы использовали эту работу с молодежью для того, чтобы популяризировать дистанционное электронное голосование, потому что понятно, что основные участники в самом начале использования технологий – это молодежь. Поэтому мы провели достаточно большое количество выборов в молодежные парламенты и помогли около 20 университетам Российской Федерации, суммарно больше 100 тысячам студентов, провести прямые выборы глав студенческих образований. Ну, представляете себе университет, 10 тысяч человек, провести прямые выборы без электронных технологий практически невозможно. Бумажный выбор – это очень долго, очень дорого и практически непосильно для студентов. При этом онлайн-выборы для студентов — это буквально там пара минут подготовки, и далее все студенты могут голосовать. В результате до 2019 года мы и Центральная избирательная комиссия проводили работу по популяризации дистанционного голосования среди студентов, получили опыт, получили обратную связь, посмотрели, какие были вопросы, проблемы, и уже после этого, получив какой-то опыт, получив какой-то фреймворк для работы с дистанционным электронным голосованием, уже был приняты соответствующие законы, и далее было проведено первое официальное дистанционное электронное голосование, выборы в Московскую городскую думу в 2019 году. Исходя из нашего опыта и исходя из опыта Москвы и вообще, в принципе, выборов Российской Федерации, мы создали вот такую тему, которую назвали e-voting study program. В чем она заключается? Мы предполагаем, что все избирательные комиссии, члены избирательных комиссий работают с молодежными сообществами, работают с молодежными избирательными комиссиями, так же, как это делает избирательная комиссия Российской Федерации. И мы приглашаем избирательные комиссии к сотрудничеству, к использованию новых избирательных технологий, в том числе дистанционного электронного голосования, на студенческих выборах, для того, чтобы посмотреть, как работает дистанционное голосование, посмотреть на какие-то плюсы, минусы этой системы и далее донести эту информацию в каком-то виде до парламента, для того, чтобы парламент имел достаточное количество оснований для изменения закона и использования в дальнейшем дистанционного электронного голосования в стране. Опять же, со мной можно не соглашаться, безусловно, это мое мнение, но я считаю, что действительно через 20, плюс-минус 15-20 лет онлайн-голосование будет полноценным способом голосования в большинстве развитых государств, потому что по-другому быть не может, поскольку наша жизнь полностью диджитализирована и продолжает цифровизироваться с каждым новым днем. В заключение я хочу пригласить всех к нам на стенд. У нас есть стенд, у нас есть брошюры. Мы бы рассказали и об опыте Москвы и Российской Федерации по проведению онлайн-голосования, потому что, еще раз хочу сказать, что по моим данным, это второе по величине голосование в государстве после кейса Эстонии. Но при этом в России живет 100 миллионов человек. Я думаю, будет интересно пообщаться на эту тему. И в том числе мы бы рассказали про нашу e-voting study program, каким образом мы предлагаем посотрудничать в области youth participation, участие молодых людей в использовании новых избирательных технологий и, в принципе, в создании поиска новых молодежных лидеров в стране. Это достаточно тоже важная, актуальная задача. Большое спасибо за приглашение на эту конференцию. Я закончил. Спасибо.
Move forward to our fourth speaker, who is Mohamed Mansour, Sales Director for the EMEA Smartmatic. And Smartmatic, as you know, is another silver sponsor of our conference. Smartmatic actually is well known. The company established in 2000 in Florida and is a global leader in secure, accessible, transparent elections, voting technologies, and support services. About Mr. Mansour, he has more than 10 years experience in election management and advisory. Also, he has a passion for creativity utilizing technologies to improve elections. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed. I work for Smartmatic, the elections company, and I will be addressing today the role technology can play in increasing young voters' turnout. A recent publication by International IDEA on voter turnout trends quoted a study conducted in 59 countries from all regions of the world, concluded that young voters 25 years and younger are the segment with the least turnout across the world against older generations. That is not to say that young voters are not politically engaged. Actually, they are involved in political campaigning, grassroots movements, peer-to-peer engagement and mobilization. it seems that there are barriers to their participation. Amongst that can be voter registration requirements, ID requirements, and possibly the manner that they are required to vote in. It may be inefficient in their views. So the question is, how can you translate that engagement into election participation? The most recent data from the GSM Alliance intelligence report states that 85% of the global population above 13 years old have mobile devices. And mobile phones have become the first screens replacing PCs as the access to digital information over the internet. So the premise here is that online voting can play a vital role to ensure that young people participate in elections. What are the benefits that internet voting brings? First off, it's convenient. You don't have to go to a polling station to vote. You don't have to go within a certain time frame to participate in an election. You can do it from anywhere at any time. Second off, it's cost efficient. There was a study conducted in the UK by an NGO called WebRoots. It concluded that the cost of UK elections would be reduced by a third if internet voting was adopted as an additional voting channel for the populace. It also concluded that the turnout of the election would increase by 9 million voters, and youth participation in particular would increase to 70%. Furthermore, it's inclusive. It relies on a concept of bringing the ballot paper to the voter rather than bringing the voter to the ballot. So in that sense, it's not only inclusive of young people, but also people with mobility issues or challenges. It's also accessible. So if a voter is using assistive technology on their own devices, they may also be able to use them in order to access their ballots, such as screen readers, sip and puff, or so on. We can see here the impact of allowing a convenient channel for youth participation. In last year's election in the US, in states where universal voting by mail was allowed, we saw a youth participation rate of 57%, while in more restrictive states, the youth participation rate was only 42%. That's not necessarily internet voting, but it's just a matter of explaining how convenience can play a factor in increasing turnout. And now I will share a few examples of internet voting deployments around the world. Most famously, of course, is Estonia, where they hold nationwide internet elections for the past 15 years or so. They've had over 11 electoral events, all national, allowing all voters to participate in online elections. And in those elections in particular, we saw a trend of growth of the adoption of that channel, from 5% when it was initially deployed, all the way up to almost 50% in the last election. Another example is a county called Finnmark in Norway, where in 2018 they deployed internet voting for a referendum. 85% of all voters that cast their votes chose to do that online. And to see another benefit of internet voting, they chose to deploy that election in 3 different languages. So that's another example of how inclusive that solution may be. Final example is from Utah in the US. In 2016, one of the 2 major political parties in the US held their caucus for the presidential candidate over internet voting. 89% of the votes were cast online. And yet another example of the convenience and the inclusion. Those voters cast their votes from 45 different countries around the world. And that was the first deployment of blockchain in internet voting. Thank you very much, and I look forward to receiving you at our booth outside.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mansour. Again, perfect timing. Thank you. If I may ask, do you agree with your colleague from Polis that perhaps 20 years, 25 years, within 25 years, we will have internet voting as common voting procedure?
I would say I would half agree with him. So internet voting will definitely become more prominent, but I don't agree on the direct democracy part. Parliaments will still exist.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that unfortunately we are out of time. I think more than 15 minutes. But once again, I wish to thank to all the panelists. I hope you will agree that during this 75 minutes, we all have learned a lot from their experience and perhaps get new ideas for the future work. So it was also great pleasure for me to chair this interesting session. And so I'm closing this session and wish all of us fruitful further discussions during the next sessions of the conference.